Hi, let's talk about topic sentences. These are signposts for you and your audience. A topic sentence is a sentence that appears at the beginning of a paragraph, and it tells the reader the topic of the paragraph. At least that's what you learned when you were in grade school. Many students remember the awkward topic sentences they wrote in grade school, so they try to avoid topic sentences in college. Your topic sentences are often associated with memories of the 5-paragraph essay. Many students want to write more sophisticated papers than the 5-paragraph essay, but they don't quite know how, and they associate topic sentences with those days of writing poorly constructed, boring essays. Now, the 5-paragraph essay is often boring, but it does teach you some valuable things. So if you've never encountered one before, let's talk about a 5-paragraph essay real quick. Your topic might be something like, there are lots of interesting facts about me. And you might have written this essay when you were in 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th grade. So you would interest your reader with the sentence in white, telling them that there's interesting things about you, and then you might make a list of the 3 main things that you're going to cover in your body paragraphs. You'd make that parallel, so you would use a verb for each one. I like to eat ice cream, I like to go to the movies, and I like to jump on my trampoline. Now we can already predict the structure, right? So here is the title, Facts About Me. You have your hook in white, lots of interesting facts about me. You have your thesis statement, this one-sentence statement in yellow. And of course your first topic sentence is, I like to eat ice cream. It mirrors, as you can tell, that thesis, part of the thesis. Topic sentences do connect parts of the argument to the thesis statement. Now you would elaborate on your love of ice cream, or your like of ice cream. You might say, my favorite flavor is Jamocha almond fudge. I love to go to the ice cream store to order a giant waffle cone, and then you would tell us more about this. Now, students are often confused about what paragraphs themselves are supposed to do and be, particularly as their writing evolves. So if you're trying to move past the 5-paragraph essay, but you don't know what you're moving to, often you'll become confused about some very basic elements of writing. I can't tell you the number of times I've read a paper by a college student, usually a, a freshman who doesn't know what he or she is doing, with a 1-paragraph introduction, a body that is a single 2- or 3-page paragraph, and then a 1-paragraph conclusion. This is not the way to write. Paragraphs themselves are simply ways of chunking information together and ways to make your reader read faster and easier. Each paragraph should focus on one main idea. Now, academic writing allows you to write longer paragraphs than business writing, but you're going to want to think about your topic sentences. Be careful. Begin a new paragraph when you begin a new idea or aspect of an idea, and signal to yourself and your reader what you're going to talk about. Readers get tired when paragraphs are too long. Here's a general rule of thumb. A short essay of 2 to 3 pages should typically include a minimum of 5 paragraphs. Now, here's a general question, which we should probably address. How do you become a better writer? Well, I'm going to give you the hard answer. How do you write better paragraphs? Well, you read. You read a lot. Now, what does this mean for you? Read a little bit every day. Make it part of your plan. What's another way to become a better writer? Well, if reading is part of your plan, reading is something you do every day, read edited information, the second thing that you want to do is revise. Read your writing critically and rewrite. Ask yourself for each paragraph, and this is just a rule that I give students who don't know where to start. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this paragraph? This is the beginning of analysis. Analysis consists of breaking things into pieces, which is what creating paragraphs does. You chunk things together that seem similar, that seem like, and then ask yourself, what is it doing? What is it supposed to be doing? Now, after you've thought about all this, I want you to consider that if I really emphasized reading, I'm going to particularly emphasize writing. Write a lot. Do research. And do real research. Don't just cherry pick information. Look for connections between pieces of information. That's what college level writing is about, and college level researching is about. This is your real life for the rest of your life. Look for connections, look for interesting connections, and follow those up. Write about those connections. Know that your writing is going to be flawed. You are going to have to revise. And revision itself is going to make you a better writer. So when you're sitting there complaining and angry because it takes you a while to revise, remember, this is making you better. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this paragraph? And when you write that topic sentence that tells the purpose of the paragraph, you're going to tell both your reader and yourself. I want you to create a sentence for each paragraph when revising. This sentence expresses the purpose of the paragraph and its connection to the thesis statement. The sentence allows you to critically examine the paragraph and its placement. Ask yourself, does this paragraph and its main idea lead naturally to the next paragraph? Does this paragraph explore ideas that need to be included in the thesis statement? What are the key words in this paragraph? Now, if we're looking at the 5-paragraph essay, we will have topic sentences, as you can tell. We have I like to eat ice cream that's connected to our thesis statement. Now your paragraphs in your research paper are going to be more sophisticated because they're going to ask more difficult questions. And they're going to explore more difficult and complex ideas, but they perform basically the same function. Topic sentences organize your writing. They offer signposts for your reader. So we can tell what's going to be proven in that thesis statement, and we can see, there it is. It's easy to find. You need to fulfill, particularly in academia, audience expectations. Give people what they want and what they're looking for. Here's your elaboration. When people want to know more, give them more. So here we have the beginning of a 5-paragraph essay. It's very basic. And we add on to it. We knew where we were going because obviously, the second part of our thesis, I like to go to the movies. So there we have our topic sentence. And then you have the elaboration about Pirates of the Caribbean and the special effects and why this person likes it. Now we're going to have another paragraph. Aha! The third part of the thesis, and it's being fulfilled. Yay, I like to jump on the trampoline in my backyard. I can do backflips and aerials. I've been practicing for years. So here we have the facts about me essay. And we finally get to the conclusion, where you wrap up all your loose ends. As you can tell, I'm an active person who loves treats. I love rich ice cream, exciting movies, and the thrill of jumping on my trampoline. So here's the connection between the thesis statement and the conclusion. Both of these reiterate the same ideas. Now in your papers, your conclusion may develop ideas further than your thesis. This is expected when you are asking more difficult questions than, facts about me. Your writing and your ideas are going to develop. 5-paragraph essays themselves are usually predictable. They offer students a skeleton to help develop their ideas, and they're easy for most students to understand. You know where the introduction, the hook, the thesis statement, the topic sentences, the elaboration are supposed to be in a 5-paragraph essay. They are difficult for many students to leave behind, and that's that interesting point that many students and professors hit in college level writing. Where do we go from here? We don't want to be a 5-paragraph essay anymore, but we do want to explore some interesting ideas. So I want to urge you to change your perspective. See research papers themselves as a journey. You don't have to fit a rigid paragraph format anymore, but you do need to keep the things that made the 5-paragraph essay work. Research papers themselves are an opportunity to change, to grow. Research papers themselves should change as you find new information, so the papers themselves change. Research papers' thesis statements should change as you write the paper. So the thesis statement, the working thesis statement, you write in the beginning and you write halfway through. As you revise, you'll change it. That may not be the thesis statement when you turn in the paper at the conclusion, and that is expected. That thesis statement should develop, becoming more specific. Topic sentences help you determine relationships and become more critical as a writer. So I urge you to create a flowchart when you have gotten halfway through your paper and you've done a lot of research and suddenly that paper seems big and complex and difficult to figure out and you don't know what to do next. Create a flowchart and look at what you have, write out just a few words and try to figure out what goes where. So here we have an essay in which someone begins with a hook, a horror story about a boy kidnapped from his Indian family and sold to Americans. We lead into adoption statistics, and then we have a thesis statement about Indian adoption, which is too corrupt, with too many kidnapped children, and this person wants to talk about the adoption scars that psychologists identify. So let's break that into parts. The thesis statement is in blue, and the parts of the thesis statement that need to be proven, each part gets its own box, and let's see if that makes sense. Too corrupt, too many kidnapped children, all these adoption scars. Well, let's break this even further. In the horror story about Subhash, who's kidnapped from his Indian family, he's sold to an orphanage. He's adopted by Americans. Then we're going to look at the adoption statistics, and we're going to look specifically at American adoptions from India, because Subhash himself was sold to Americans. Then we have a thesis statement that is more specific, that looks at this as one example of a bigger problem. Subhash is an example of the corruption of the Indian adoption system. Other kidnapped children adopted by Americans reveal an uglier face of international adoption. So here we have Subhash, here we have the other kidnapped children, here we have the uglier face. Now we're proving three things here, but this, unlike our 5-paragraph essay explored before, is not a 5-paragraph essay. These are big ideas. They're going to take a lot of paragraphs to explore. So when we break this down, we have the horror story with all these sentences. He's sold to the Indian orphanage. He's adopted by Americans. We have the adoption statistics. We have one of many examples, other kidnapped children, corruption, and the uglier face of international adoption. At this point in blue, we have 4 big parts of our thesis statement that need to be proven. Now, here are all my other kidnapped children. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kidnapped children, and they're all Indian, so we've changed our uglier face of adoption from India and by Americans. Let's make that more specific. Corruption of Indian adoption system. Let's make this all about India. We don't have facts about another country, so don't make an argument about another country. Now, topic sentences themselves help you determine relationships and become more critical as a writer. So, if we are working on this thesis statement about Subhash, which we just saw a moment ago, and we are thinking, okay, where does this paper need to go? What's going to happen? We've created our flowchart. Let's look at all those kidnapped children that we saw a minute before. So we have Mohammed's kidnapping was similar to Subhash. Then we have Aditya, who was sold. We have Ayan, who was turned over to an orphanage by her family. We have another person turned over to an orphanage. And we have another child who was sold by a sibling. Group and look for patterns. That's what you need to do with all this differing information when you do research. Group it. Mohammed and Subhash had similar kidnappings. Aditya and Darsh were both sold by family members. Ayan and Ryan were turned over to orphanages by family members, but they were not relinquished. The family members didn't sign any legal paperwork. So here is our grouping. We have a pattern here. We've grouped according to patterns. Think about your keywords. So for each of these, what are our keywords? Kidnapping, sold, turned over to an orphanage, plan to return. These are the things that make that the reader is going to immediately notice and that you need to think about using in your thesis statement and in your topic sentences. So ask yourself, for each piece of evidence, what is the purpose of this? Why is this important? Create those topic sentences. So here are, for each of our examples, topic sentences that use those keywords and that transition into the example details. So, obviously, some children are kidnapped from their families and sold to orphanages or middlemen. For example, Muhammad's kidnapping was similar to Subhash's. He was, and then in the paragraph itself, we would explore that data. Other Indian children have been sold to orphanages by family members. 2 examples illustrate how easily this can occur, particularly in areas of high poverty. This could begin a paragraph or 2 and relay this information and these details that you have found in your research. Another paragraph addresses this. Another group of children are left in orphanages temporarily by their families, but those families intend to return and reclaim them, for example. So now we go into those paragraphs. Now each of these is probably going to be 1 or more paragraphs. So these topic sentences introduce whole ideas, and they may be hinge points for multiple paragraphs, but I want you to think about them. Now the original statement had Subhash as just one example of many kidnapped children who are adopted, who were, kidnapped from their birth families. When we look at our topic sentences that we just created, we discovered that it wasn't all about kidnapping. Some of these children were sold. Some of the children were given to the orphanages by parents who didn't relinquish their rights. So your thesis statement needs to address what you have found and put into your topic sentences. So here is a revised thesis statement. Subhash is just one example of many children adopted by Americans from Indian orphanages whose birth parents never intended to give up their rights, but whose children are kidnapped or sold without their permission. This reveals some of the corruption of the Indian adoption system and puts a more negative face on Americans' adoptions from India. Now, everything after the semicolon, if you wanted to, if you had written your paper and it was 6 paragraphs long, 6 body paragraphs, maybe it's 7 pages, and you only have to write 7 pages, and you've proven everything before the semicolon, do you have to prove what's after the semicolon? No. In fact, I urge you to chop that thesis statement down and make sure it only addresses what you prove. So if you're writing a paper and this is your title, Kidnapped and Sold, Indian Orphans Adopted by Americans, and here notice how I have the orphans in quotation marks because we are implying that they aren't in fact orphans. They are not biologically orphans. Their parents are not dead. Now, this is our specific argument, which is relayed in our title. And we talked about titles in another video. Here is the text we're discussing. So if we're going to make Subhash a main part of our argument, you might mention the author and the title of the article name. And here is the beginning of our narrative hook. So your paper begins with the title, Kidnapped and Sold, Indian Orphans Adopted by Americans. Our text, a recent article by Scott Carney, relates a terrifying story for any parents. So this is also a hook. People are like, ooh, terrifying story, okay. Chennai, a small slum in India, is considered a safe area to many, but one family discovered the danger of this high poverty area. So here we are beginning to tell a story. This is a narrative hook, narrative meaning story. So we continue on. With this high poverty area, Subhash, a young boy, was left briefly by the neighborhood pump a few dozen feet from their home. When his mother returned for him moments later, she discovered that a man grabbed her son and pulled him into a 3-wheeled auto rickshaw. From there, she later discovered her son was taken to an orphanage that paid good money for healthy children. So we look at this next bit of the paper, and this is all the same paragraph, but I wanted it to be big enough for you to see it. So let's go back to our from there sentence. From there, she later discovered her son was taken to an orphanage that paid good money for healthy children. Subhash was eventually adopted by an American family who believed him to be an orphan, while his biological family continued to search for him in India. This is the horror created by adoption fees when children become goods. So let's look at where goods appears in our next sentence. We're still in the same paragraph. This is a long paragraph. This is a long story, but you've interested your reader, and this relates to your argument in a very important way. This is the horror created by high adoption fees when children become goods. Now we have in yellow and blue our thesis statement. Subhash is just one example of many children adopted by Americans from Indian orphanages whose birth parents never intended to give up their rights, but whose children are kidnapped or sold without their permission. This reveals some of the corruption in the Indian adoption system and puts a more negative face on Americans' adoptions from India. Now, here's all of this in yellow and blue is what's going to be proven, our thesis statement. Now, topic sentences, as I want to remind you again and again, are signposts for readers. They remind readers why each part of the paper is significant. So here are topic sentences that we've created that are related to the research we've done. These appear at different points in the paper. So when I see this topic sentence, obviously, as Subhash's story shows, some children are kidnapped from their families and sold to orphanages or middlemen. For example, Muhammad's kidnapping was similar to Subhash's. He was, and then I might write 100, 200 words and reference other texts and my sources to make my point. Here's another topic sentence. Other Indian children have been sold to orphanages by family members. Two examples illustrate how easily this can occur, particularly in areas of high poverty. And then this paragraph would continue on to tell us what is so significant here. Here's a final topic sentence. Another group of children are left at orphanages temporarily by their families. But those families intend to return and reclaim them. Okay, I think we could delete those two commas there after orphanages and families, but other than that, this is okay. The parents never gave away their rights, but the orphanages still offer the children for adoption, for example. Now, this is a third part of the paper. See how this is all connected to our thesis statement? Each piece of the thesis should be addressed in your paper. You should be able to cross-check your thesis against topic sentences. And it might take multiple paragraphs to prove one single part of the thesis in the paper itself. So be aware you don't have to, as in the 5-paragraph essay, just have one paragraph per part of the thesis. You don't have to just make a list and address everything on the list. It might take you 3 or 4 paragraphs to prove a part of your thesis, but make sure it's proven and make sure that you keep the reader on track and the reader knows where you are. Here's a useful metaphor. Think of your job in the paper as the writer to operate as if you're a tour guide at a historic house. Now, as you approach the house, you're going to need to, even if your audience knows a great deal about the house, be methodical and organized and clear. So even if your audience understands a lot about the topic, remember they've hired you for a tour. You have to walk them through carefully and specifically. Talk about each thing. Give the specific name for the thing. Talk about why it's important. You don't have to treat people like they're stupid, but talk about the door, the roof, the doorknob. Anticipate audience questions based on who they are and anticipate their needs. Be clear and precise. Begin at the beginning and walk the audience to each point. So part of your job in the paper itself is to decide what the beginning is. Where is a natural beginning point? Is it chronological? Is it moving from numbers to more specific data, or is it moving from more specific data to looking at how that data functions in an entire population? So if we look at Subhash's story and then we look at Indian adoptions overall and those statistics, that might be an interesting move to go from the specific to the more general and see if his story holds true. He might be an anomaly. He might be just a random situation, but we need to investigate that. For each part of your paper, explain why it's unique and interesting. Explain its relationship to the next part. If you don't want to address something or it does not apply to the argument, then narrow your argument in the beginning. So in that thesis statement, narrow your argument. Be specific. So if you were a tour guide, you might look at the house and explain in the beginning, our tour today of the Meriwether Brinkman house will just focus on the kitchen and dining rooms because so much occurred in those rooms during the season. Okay, we would narrow our tour focus because it would take too long to look at the entire house if we're going to explore these 2 rooms in depth. You might want to do the same thing in your paper. Don't promise your reader you're going to write a book about a topic if you only want to write 5 to 10 pages. When you're the tour guide for a group of people, you give those people a structure for understanding why what they see is unique and interesting. That is what topic sentences do. They give the audience, and you as the writer, a structure. Instead of leaving the audience to find information on their own and draw their own conclusions, you are to present each piece of evidence and tie it back to your overall argument. Present and tie back. These are the things to remember. Reminder, when you revise for each paragraph, once again, I've said this a million times and I'll say it a million times to you in person, ask yourself, what is the purpose of this paragraph? A topic sentence tied to the thesis should